Hello, everyone. You are welcome to PHCL 203 Outlines of Greco-Roman Civilizations. Welcome back to our academic journey here on YouTube. I am thrilled to embark on another intellectual journey with all of you. Today, we are delving into the topic geography of the ancient Greek civilization. This topic is so fascinating in the sense that it is pivotal, it is crucial to understanding of who we are as human beings. I'll crave your indulgence to buckle up because we'll be delving into some intriguing topics that will blow your mind. Imagine our planet, an intricate stage where human beings and their environment engage in a dance of influences, shaping civilizations and cultures. It's a tale of how the landscapes, the geography, the physical environment mold societies, and how ingenious human beings navigate geographical challenges, and how the unexpected factors of probability spice up this cosmic journey. So, my dear friends and students, fasten your seatbelts. We are going to study these theories, and we'll be stepping into the shoes of some philosophers and some historians who have dared to decode, dared to understand the intricate dance between human beings and their environment. Get ready for a roller coaster of ideas, a symphony of perspectives, and a celebration of intellectual curiosity. At this point, I'll crave your indulgence once again to hit that subscriber button. Share this lecture with another friend. You can choose to grab that favorite snack and let us embark on this intellectual odyssey together. Once again, welcome to PHCL 203 Outlines of Greco-Roman Civilizations. Let the exploration begin. I am not just an academic. I am a passionate explorer of the classical world, a forward-thinking educator, and a catalyst for change in the realm of classical studies. With an unwavering commitment to my vision, I bring the wisdom of the Greco-Roman civilization into the modern age, igniting curiosity and challenging conventional thinking. My name is Didi Okansi Jr., and I'm excited to lead you in this interesting discussion. I'm a senior member of the Department of Philosophy and Classics, University of Ghana. I am hoping that at the end of this particular lecture, students will be able to explain that the physical context of every civilization is a necessary condition for understanding that civilization. I'm also hoping that students will be able to expound and contextualize the theories of environmental determinism, environmental possibilism, and environmental probabilism from a Greek civilization perspective. My objective 3 is that students will be able to apply the theories of environmental determinism, environmental possibilism, and environmental probabilism as a theoretical framework to elucidate the connections between geographic factors or indicators such as the land, the water bodies, the vegetation, the climate, civilization, and human development of the ancient Greek civilization. And finally, I'm hoping that my students will be able to superimpose the Greek experience onto the Ghanaian reality, identifying both points of divergence and points of convergence. As a guide, I'll first of all try to place the whole discussion in context by looking at some preambles. I'll go ahead to look at some theories of human geography relationship, but I'll pay particular attention to the trilogy of environmental determinism, environmental possibilism, and environmental probabilism. I'll go ahead to look at some geographic indicators of the ancient Greek civilization and see how best these theories can be used to explain the correlations that exist between the physical environment, civilizations, and human development. And finally, I'll end the lecture by looking at some reflections for developing nations like Ghana. I would also like to add that this YouTube recording will be in 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. Part 1 will take into consideration the preamble together with the theories of human geography relationship. And part 2 will look at the geographic indicators of the ancient Greek civilization vis-a-vis how we can use the theories to interpret them. And finally, end with conclusions and reflections for developing nations like Ghana. The recommended texts can be clearly seen on the screens and have also been provided in the course outline. May we now begin this lecture by looking at some preambles. The ancient Greeks achieved remarkable feats, from philosophy to politics to arts to culture. I can go on and on. However, for us to fully understand the factors that contributed to their achievement, it is important for us to examine the profound impact of their physical environment. And this particular lecture explores that intricate relationship between geography, human development, and the emergence or success of the ancient Greek civilization. You will note that by delving into the territorial extent, the landscape, the climate, the vegetation, the maritime accessibility, we will be uncovering some foundational factors that shaped the unique features of the ancient Greek civilization. So what I'll be doing subsequently is to offer a critical commentary on some extracts from prominent scholars on this particular subject matter. And these scholars have attempted an explanation into the reasons or the causes of the remarkable achievement of the Greek civilization from a geographical perspective. I'll begin my first extract with that of Aristotle. And he says, I quote, "People living in colder places and Europe are filled with courage and ambition, but their skills and mental abilities are limited. This is why, although capable of maintaining their independence, they cannot form a political unity or govern others. The Asians, on the other hand, have both brains and skills, but they lack the courage and will. Thus, they are doomed to slavery. The Hellenes, being geographically in the middle, and I repeat, the Hellenes, being geographically in the middle, had their share from both of them. Thus, they own the best political institutions and are able to maintain their independence. Unquote. A critical analysis of this particular statement of Aristotle from a human environment interaction perspective provides insight into the historical context and the interplay between geography, culture, and political organization. Aristotle's assertion about people in colder places and Europe being courageous but limited in skills and mental ability reflects an earlier form of environmental determinism, a theory I'll be talking about very soon. These perspectives suggest a direct link between geographical conditions and human characteristics. But from a contemporary viewpoint, it is essential that we challenge this particular deterministic approach because it oversimplifies the complex relationship between humans and their environment. The idea that people in colder places possess courage due to the challenges of the environment is reminiscent of environmental adaptation theories. While it is true that environmental challenges can shape cultures, overlooking the diversity of skills and mental abilities within these regions is problematic. People adapt to their environment in various ways, and intelligence and skills are influenced by a lot of factors that go beyond the climate. So you notice that Aristotle's division of the ancients into possessing brains and skills but lacking courage and will, leading them to slavery, to some extent reflects some bias and ethnocentric perspective. And this particular oversimplification ignores the rich cultural, social, and environmental factors that shape human beings or that shape who we are as human beings. The concept that the Hellenes benefiting from the middle by being geographically in the middle, and as a result of that, they have the best political institutions and they have been able to maintain their independence, also suggests a simplistic understanding of how geography influences political development. So while geography can influence interactions and resource availability, it is only one of the many factors shaping political institutions. In the context of human-environment interaction, it is very crucial for us to recognize the reciprocal relationship between human beings and their environment. People adapt to their environment, but they also shape and modify their environment. Political and social and economic systems are normally influenced by the dynamic interplay of culture, technology, and other factors. And I am of the view that Aristotle's perspective, while it is very historically significant, it should be approached critically from a human-environment interaction standpoint, recognizing the limitations of environmental determinism and appreciating the complexity of human adaptation and societal development is very essential for a more nuanced understanding of the relationship between people and their environment. The next excerpt I will be looking at is that of Bury and Meiggs. And they argue, I quote, "The rivers and the valleys, the mountains, bays, and islands of Greece is useful at the very outset to grab some general features which went to make the history of the Greeks what it was and what otherwise it could not have been. The character of their history is so intimately connected with the character of their dwelling places that we cannot conceive it apart from their lands and seas. Unquote. This particular excerpt from A History of Greece by Beery and Meiggs underscores the importance of the geographical context in shaping the history of the Greeks. In fact, it emphasizes on the rivers, the valley, the mountain bays, and the islands as fundamental to understanding Greek history, and this clearly outlines or aligns with human geography perspective. And from this particular viewpoint, you note that the environment is seen as a dynamic force that shapes human behavior, a dynamic force that shapes societal structure, and a dynamic force that shapes historical development. And this particular assertion that the character of the Greek history is intimately connected with their dwelling places recognizes the reciprocal relationship between human beings and the environment. Geographical features such as the river, the valley, the mountains often influence settlement patterns, influence trade routes, influence resource distribution, and even influence the impact on socio-economic development and even political development of a particular society. The bays and the islands, for example, also play a crucial role in maritime activities, aiding trade and even cultural exchange. So, by acknowledging the interdependence of history and geography, Beery and Meiggs highlight the significance of considering environmental factors in historical analysis. And this particular perspective encourages an understanding of how the natural landscape, the climate, the topography contribute to a unique characteristic of a particular civilization. In fact, this particular extract appreciates and recognizes the inseparable connection between the Greeks, their history, and their geographical conditions. And to a larger extent, this particular extract underscores the importance of incorporating human-environment interaction perspectives in order to comprehend, in order to understand the complexities of historical narratives. In my third extract, in my quest to delve into the geography of the ancient Greek civilization, I'll be looking at a quotation from Pomeroy et al., and I quote, "Those far-flanked Greeks left a priceless of legacy of achievements in art, in literature, in politics, in philosophy, in mathematics, in science and war. Their story is a long and fascinating one. A history of the Greeks must begin with the land. For the natural environment of a people, the landscape, the climate, and the natural resources is a major factor in determining the way they lived and how they developed socially." Unquote. In this particular excerpt by Pomeroy et al., they emphasize the significance of the natural environment in understanding the achievements and the development of the ancient Greek civilization. And this particular perspective aligns very much with human-environment interaction framework that recognizes the dynamic relationship between a society and their environment. The acknowledgement of a priceless of legacy in various fields, including art, literature, politics, mathematics, science, and war reflects an appreciation of the multifaceted contribution of the Greeks to modernity. So by asserting that the history of the Greeks must first of all begin with an examination of the land, the climate, and the natural resources, they tend to highlight the importance of contextualizing human endeavors within an environmental context. From a human-environment interaction viewpoint, the landscape, the climate, and the resources play an integral role, a vital role, in shaping societal structures, in shaping economic activities, and in shaping cultural expressions. So, for instance, the geographical layout of Greece, with its rugged terrain and scattered islands, influenced trade. It influenced communication to the extent that it helped in the establishment, or it influenced the establishment of city-states. So by placing so much emphasis on the natural environment, Palmer et al. Encourage readers to consider how the Greeks' way of life and their social development were intricately linked to their surroundings. And this particular approach adds some depth. It adds some depth to the historical narrative by recognizing that environmental factors that contributed to the unique characteristics of the Greek civilization cannot be swept under the carpet. And for me, Palmer et al., they appreciate the recognition of the importance of the natural environment in shaping the history of the ancient Greeks. And this particular extract underscores the value of adapting the human geography interaction perspective to comprehensively understand the complexities of a society's development and the enduring impact of its achievements. The next extract I'll be looking at is one from Anthony Andrew. He argues, and I quote, "It is a poor land, but it is also a land in which a full life can be led on rather slender resources. Geography and climate do not by themselves account for the manifold achievement of the ancient Greeks, but they determine some of the ways in which their civilization grew. An examination of the Greek society must begin with the physical facts." Unquote. In this particular excerpt from Anthony Andrew, he emphasizes the importance of considering the physical environment, particularly the land's quality and climate, in understanding the achievement and development of the ancient Greek civilization. He acknowledges that the land of the ancient Greeks was a poor land and therefore reflects an awareness of the challenges that is posed by the physical environment. However, he balances this by noting that a full life can still be led on rather slender resources. And this particular recognition speaks to the resilience and the adaptability of the ancient Greeks, and therefore suggests that they found ways to thrive despite the limitations of their geographical settings. His assertion that geography and climate alone do not account for the manifold achievement of the ancient Greeks is very important and crucial. It cautions against deterministic thinking and emphasizes the complexity of other factors that contribute to the development of civilization. So here, while acknowledging the role of the physical condition, Anthony Andrews suggests that other cultural, social, historical aspects also play a significant role in shaping the civilization of the ancient Greeks. His statement that an examination of the Greek society must begin with the physical facts underscores the fundamental role that the environment plays in historical development. And this particular perspective, it prompts to some extent a holistic analysis, urging us to consider how physical landscapes influence settlement patterns, agricultural practices, trade routes, and other aspects of our daily life. And this particular extract from Andrews provides some understanding or by acknowledging the impact of geography and climate on the ancient Greek civilization. But it also cautions against oversimplification, and in fact it invites we the readers to explore the relationship between the physical environment and the multifaceted development of societies. The last but not the least extract, and a personal favorite, is by Aka, and I quote, "The account of the remarkable achievement of the Greeks and the reasons for or causes of those achievements will be incomplete without reference to the physical environment in which the Greeks lived. This suggests that some correlation exists between the physical environment, human development, and civilization," unquote. This particular extract is a very interesting extract. In fact, it reflects a sound understanding of the interconnectedness between human achievements, the physical environment, and civilization. This particular acknowledgement that the account of the Greeks' accomplishment will be incomplete without considering the physical environment aligns with the recognition that the environmental factors are integral to understanding historical developments. In fact, his phrase, "some correlations exist between the physical environment, human development, and civilization," indicates an awareness of the complex relationship that shapes society. And in fact, it implies an appreciation of the multifaceted ways in which geography and climate and the natural resources influence culture, influence social, economic and human. That it reflects how geography and climate and the natural resources influence culture and how it influences social and economic aspects of the human being. In fact, especially from a Greek civilization perspective, and in fact it emphasizes the importance of the physical environment by encouraging us to go beyond a simplistic analysis and consider the nuanced interplay between human beings and the environment. And this particular perspective is crucial in avoiding deterministic views that attribute achievement solely to geographical factors, while recognizing that the relationship is a reciprocal relationship. However, it is very essential to note that while the physical environment plays a very significant role, it is not the sole determinant of civilization or human development. Other factors such as social, political, and cultural dynamics also contribute to the complexity of human history. So a critical human-environment interaction perspective should consider these factors in conjunction with the physical environment. And in fact, this particular extract represents a thoughtful recognition of the importance of the physical environment in understanding the achievement of the Greeks. In fact, it really aligns well with the principles of the human environment interactions I've earlier on made mention of from a very holistic perspective by exploring the intricate connections between the environment, between environmental conditions and the development of civilizations. So, what critical observations can we make from the various extracts we've looked at? Extracts from scholars who have attempted an interpretation of the reasons or the causes of the remarkable achievement of the Greek civilization from a geographical perspective, or what similarities, what observations can we make in relation to similarities and differences? The first observation we can make is a recognition of environmental influence. In fact, all the extracts we have looked at recognize the influence of the physical environment on the development of the Greek civilization. By discussing the Greek achievement, their political institutions, or their societal structures, there's a common acknowledgement that the environment played a very important role. The second observation we can make in terms of similarity is what I call human-environment interaction perspective. In fact, the extracts share a human-environment interaction perspective by emphasizing the dynamic relationship between human beings and their environment. In fact, these extracts suggest that to understand the Greek history fully, to comprehend the Greek history fully, to have a complete understanding of the Greek history, together with the remarkable achievement of the Greek civilization, one must first of all consider that reciprocal influence of the environment and human development. The third observation we can also make is what I call complexity beyond geography. In fact, while we acknowledge that geography plays a very important role, there's a shared sentiment across the extracts, across the scholars we've looked at, that the relationship between the Greeks and their environment is very complex. It's very complex in the sense that none of these observations simplifies the achievement or the challenges of the Greek civilization to a sole determinant of geography. It means that they all appreciate that to a larger extent, to explain the remarkable achievement of the Greek civilization, one must go beyond the physical environment. What are some of the differences? I think one of the striking differences is the degree of determinism that we can interpret into some of these extracts. In fact, when we look at the extract from Aristotle, it leans more towards determinism by making very bold claims about the characteristics of different regions. In contrast, other extracts were more nuanced, acknowledging the complexity of the factors beyond geography. Another difference we can observe is the focus on specific aspects. While all the extracts touch on various aspects of the Greek civilization, for example, from politics to art to literature, they have different emphasis. Some, for example, stress on the contributions of the Greeks in different fields, while others emphasize the adaptability of the Greeks on the necessity of considering the physical environment. And the last but not the least observation we can make is a caution against the simplification. So the extract from Anthony Andrews and that of Acker, for example, they explicitly caution against the oversimplification. In fact, they recognize that while the environment is an essential part or plays an essential part, attributing all aspects of the Greek civilization solely to the influence of the environment may be overly deterministic. Others also adapt a nuanced approach, acknowledging the multifaceted nature of the Greek achievement. So in all, I can say that the extra shared themes, recognizing the influence of the physical environment, and there are some differences in the degree of the determinism, the specific aspects emphasized, and the level of caution against the oversimplification across the extract is very clear. So these nuances, to a larger extent, contribute to a more comprehensive understanding of the complex relationship between the ancient Greeks and their physical environment. I will now move on to our next subtopic, which is the theories of human geography relationships. Do not forget that we are looking at the geography of ancient Greeks. And I began by, first of all, attempting to place the whole discussion in context. Scholars who have attempted an explanation of the reasons or causes of the remarkable achievement of the ancient Greek civilization, most often than not, pay particular attention to the physical environment. So what we are going to do is look at some theoretical frameworks in relation to human geography relationship and how we can use these theories to explain the remarkable achievement of the Greco-Roman civilization from a geographical perspective using the various geographic indicators. By human environment relationships, what do I mean? We say human environment relationship is the interplay between people and their environment. It's including the elements and the arrangement by which people use the environment and the limitation the environment normally puts on human behavior and culture. But we can also observe that human beings depend on the environment. In fact, human beings adapt to the environment, and human beings also modify the environment. But it is important to note that when it comes to the theories of human geography relationship, several theories have been adapted in human geography to help explain this relationship. So some of the significant ones include cultural ecology, which is normally a theory that argues that human societies have adapted to their physical environment and that cultural practices are shaped by the availability of resources. There's also what we call the political ecology, which is a theory that emphasizes the role of power and politics in shaping human environment interaction, particularly in relation to access to and control of resources. There's also the theory, the historical geography theory, which normally examines how human societies and cultures have changed over time and how they have been shaped by historical events and processes. There's also behavioral geography, which normally examines the behavior of individuals and groups in relation to the environment, focusing on issues such as mobility, decision-making, and spatial cognition. And there's also regional geography, which normally looks at the ways in which different regions of the world are interconnected and how they are shaped by global economic, political, and cultural factors. There's also economic geography, which normally examines the relationship between economic activity and the environment, including the location of industries and the flow of goods and services. So you notice that these theories are not mutually exclusive, and many human geographers use a combination of these perspectives to understand the complex relationship between human beings and their environment. There is also environmental determinism, environmental possibilism, and environmental probabilism as theories of human geography relationship. So I will not be concentrating on the other theories, despite the fact that I've made mention of the fact that they are not mutually exclusive. For the purposes of this particular lecture, I'll be paying particular attention to environmental determinism, environmental possibilism, and environmental probabilism. So the first human geography relationship theory I'll be looking at for the purposes of our discussion is environmental determinism. But I'd like to say, as my opening remark to introduce environmental determinism, that the relationship between human beings and their environment has been a major problem, especially from the 19th century even up to the early 20th century. And a lot of geographers, especially geographers of the classical times and the medieval times, have major concerns in relation to human geography relationship. And for that matter, the issue of the human environment interaction or the human environment relationship still continues unabated up to now. A major concern is that how do people or how do human beings relate with their environment? But you see, this particular question is one in which it has been contested. It has been contested in the sense that the environment determines human life, and as a result of that, nature in itself is a social construct. Now, at what point do we consider an explanation deterministic? We consider an explanation deterministic when one set of things directly causes, and by directly causing, I'm making reference to a linear or one directional way, another set of things. So when A causes B in a linear way or in a one directional way, then when you are able to read such meaning into it, then that particular explanation is a deterministic explanation. Major figures or proponents of environmental determinism include the German geographer Frederick Wassel and the American geographers Ellen Semple and Ellsworth Huntington. Then we also have the Australian geographer Griffith Taylor. These are major proponents of environmental determinism, and subsequently I'll try my very best to break the concept or the theory of environmental determinism into pieces. To help me break the concept of environmental determinism down, I'll be using the explanation of Amanda Briney to set the ball rolling. In her book entitled What is Environmental Determinism, she argues that environmental determinism or geographic determinism or climatic determinism is the belief that the environment, most notably its physical factors such as landforms and climate, determines the pattern of human culture and societal development. To her, to the environmental determinist, ecological, climate, and geographic factors alone are responsible for human cultures and individual decisions. Also, social conditions have virtually no impact on cultural development. I also like to add that when it comes to these concepts that I'll be taking them in the form of trilogy. We have what we call the hard determinist, hard possibilist, and hard probabilist, and what we call the soft determinist, soft possibilist, and the soft probabilist. But I'll not be delving so much into what I'm doing is to look at the general understanding, the general concept of environmental determinism, environmental possibilism, and environmental probabilism. And as earlier on indicated, when it comes to determinism, I'm using the explanation from Amanda Briney, where she makes the claim that the environment, most notably its geographic factors, that is the land, the climate, the vegetation, and so on and so forth, determine the patterns of human culture and societal development. To the extent that the ecological, climate, and geographic conditions are solely responsible for human cultures and individual decision making. To the extent that other social conditions, to a larger extent, have no impact, they have no role to play in cultural development. What then are the main tenets, the main arguments of the environmental determinist? Okay, the first tenet I'll be talking about is the role of the physical environment. In fact, to the determinist, geographic features, which includes the land, the water bodies, the climate, the vegetation, and the various resources that the environment provides us with, significantly influence societies and cultures. The next tenet I'll be talking about is the determinant of economic and social systems. In fact, to the determinists, the physical environment is a determinant of economic and social factors. To a larger extent, the environment shapes the type of economic and social systems that normally develops in specific places. And also, it influences the behavior and beliefs of these people who reside in that particular geographic area. The next tenet I'll be talking about is passive perception of human societies. In fact, to the determinist, human societies are passive entities. They are passive entities that are incapable of adapting to or actively shaping their environment. They see the human being as just a passive human being that virtually does nothing. Whatever that human being does is determined by the physical environment. The next tenet I'll be talking about is the underestimation of cultural and historical factors. In fact, a critique exists regarding the inadequate consideration of cultural, historical, political, and other factors that may normally come into play in shaping the human being. So, the determinists, they overemphasize the environment. They put so much emphasis on the environment as the primary driver of human history and human development. And the last but not the least tenet I'll be talking about is the regional differences that are normally explained by physical factors. In fact, there is the belief that distinct regions across the globe are shaped by their physical characteristics, and that the type of culture, the type of political system, the type of economy a particular society develops is dependent on the physical characteristics. And these characteristics are thought to explain the variations in societies and cultures globally. So what I've done so far is look at some of the major arguments that are normally put forth by those who subscribe to environmental determinism. Now that we are aware of the major arguments that the determinist, be it a hard determinist or a soft determinist, will put forth, what then can be the possible argument that can be offered in favor of environmental determinism? I think it is a legitimate question we can ask ourselves. So I'll just quickly go through them. Yeah. Climate and water availability. So one major argument in favor of environmental determinism is that climate and water, or weather and climate, significantly impact human societies, and as a result, the availability of water in arid areas to some extent directly influences settlement, development, agriculture, and even pastoral activities. So the availability of the water determines some of these activities. The next argument in favor is the geographical features as influences. So yes, a strong case to make is that the mountains, the rivers, the coastline, in fact, the geographical conditions and the geographical features to some extent serve as barriers that affect human movement and communication. And by affecting, it can be a positive, it can affect it positively, or it can affect it negatively. But the bottom line is that geographical features are major influences. They are major influences when it comes to human movement and human communication. The next factor I'll be talking about is about environmental influence on perceptions. Environmental influence on perceptions. The environment, to a larger extent, significantly shapes human perceptions about the world. In fact, these influence extend to the development of diverse cultures and even religious beliefs. The environment. So even in our local dispensation, the environment significantly influences some religious beliefs and some cultural practices that are dominant or prevalent in the environment that we find ourselves. Then the environment influences behavior. So a strong case to make is that whether we like it or not, the physical environment molds human behavior. The physical environment impacts interactions and to a larger extent influences our surroundings. And as a result of that, mobility patterns and way of life are largely shaped by the environmental factors. Right? So our way of life to a larger extent is shaped by environmental factors. And as a result of that, a strong case to make in favor of environmental determinism is that the environment influences our behavior. Another case to make is that the environment influences social organization. In fact, environmental conditions play a major role in shaping how people organize themselves. And I think in my subsequent submissions, especially with the second video I'll be sharing, we get to appreciate how the physical environment influenced the social organization of the Greek civilization. And this influence is evident in the formation of tribes, in the formation of city-states, and even in the formation of contemporary settlements. Environmental factors also impact history and development. The environment plays a major role in determining human history and development. And I think one of the abstracts we've earlier on looked at makes a firm claim on this particular point. And as a result, the environment influences the evolution of human societies over a period of time. And there are some who also claim that the physical environment influences the development of transportational networks. Transportational networks in turn shape trade, they shape communication, and also they exchange cultural exchanges between different geographic regions. So these are some of the arguments that some scholars normally give in favor of environmental determinism. What then are some of the arguments that people have leveled against environmental determinism? And one of the major arguments that people or scholars normally level against environmental determinism is its oversimplification. So environmental determinism seems to oversimplify that relationship, that intricate, that complex relationship between human beings and their environment, to the extent that it neglects the role of human agency and other cultural factors in shaping a particular society. Another argument that is leveled against environmental determinism is its ignorance of how human beings can adapt and shape their surroundings. So determinism seems to overlook how human beings have the ability to adapt to and actively shape or modify their environment. Then another argument that can be leveled against determinism is an assumption about economic and social systems. So determinism it appears that determinism can foster an assumption that only specific economic or social systems can develop in certain places. And this oversimplified view does not consider the potential of the human being to diversify the things around him. Environmental determinism can also be misleading when it comes to conflict and poverty. It may contribute to the perception that certain regions are inherently prone to conflict or poverty based on their physical characteristics or geographic conditions. And such assumptions are not necessarily accurate. You see? Because the system that the human being finds himself is so complex, and it involves that social and economic dynamics. So for you to read such a meaning into it in order to create the impression that certain regions are inherently prone to conflict and poverty because of their absolute location in relation to the geographic conditions within that particular location, then it is very misleading. So there is also another argument that is normally leveled against determinism. And it also appears that environmental determinism seems to neglect the role of politics and power in this whole discussion. So the perspective often ignores the role that politics and power plays in this human environment interaction, particularly in resource management, in access and control, and the political factors that come to play in managing these resources. You see, so yes, the environment can determine, but a political decision based on the power that these politicians wield or policies that they may churn out would influence how that environment determines the human being, right? Then environmental determinism also seems to oversimplify human society. In fact, determinism may foster the belief that societies are solely determined by their physical environment, and this oversimplification ignores that complexity and the agency inherent in human behavior and the decision-making process. To the extent that technologies and infrastructures are examples of the human agency modifying the environment. The environmental determinism oversimplifies this complex human nature. Then there's also the argument of potential bias and inaccuracy, where environmental determinism can lead to a biased view, categorizing societies based on their environment, and this may result in inaccurate and unfair judgment about the inferiority or superiority of certain cultures. And in fact, at the later end of the 20th century, this was a major argument that geographers or scholars leveled against determinism, right? Is that potential that it has to breed bias and inaccuracies. My last submission on environmental determinism would be a metaphorical exploration of environmental determinism using Plato's allegory of the cave. Plato's allegory of the cave is a philosophical metaphor. In Book 7 of the Republic. In this particular allegory, prisoners are chained inside a dark cave, facing a wall where shadows are cast by objects behind them and illuminated by fire. The prisoners, having never seen the outside world, perceive the shadows as the only reality. When a prisoner is freed and exposed to the sunlight outside the cave, they experience enlightenment and realize the shadows were mere illusions. The allegory symbolizes the journey from ignorance to knowledge, highlighting the transformative power of education and the pursuit of truth. It serves as an allegorical exploration of philosophers' ascent from the world of experience to the realm of true knowledge and understanding. This allegory provides a conceptual framework that, when stretched, can be used to explain certain aspects of environmental determinism. I like to place on record but that Plato did not directly address environmental determinism in his writings. The allegory of the cave just offers a metaphorical insight that can be metaphorically extended to understand the relationship between human beings and their environment in the context of environmental determinism. A careful read, you will note that the cave, when stretched, can represent the environment. In the allegory of the cave, the prisoners are chained inside a dark cave. And in this dark cave, they are facing a wall where shadows are projected. The cave represents a confined and limited environment. Environmental determinism, on the other hand, posits that the natural surroundings, such as the climate, such as the vegetation, such as the land, such as the water bodies, can constrain and shape human societies. A careful read once again, an allegory of the cave, we can equate the shadow as a representation of the influences of the environment. The shadows in Plato's allegory are just mere illusions, representing a distorted reality. In the context of environmental determinism, one can draw a parallel by considering the influences of the environment as shaping the perceptions and behaviors of individuals and societies. The environment just normally casts shadows in the form of climate-induced behaviors, resource-driven economic structures, and cultural characteristics. The chain represents the constraints of geography. Prisoners in the cave are chained. They are limited by their ability to see beyond the shadows. This can be metaphorically related to the constraint imposed by geographical features in environmental determinism. Certain geographic factors can act as chains, limiting the choices and possibilities available to societies, thereby influencing their development. The release and enlightenment part of the allegory represents environmental awareness. You will note that the journey from the released prisoner in the allegory, moving from darkness to enlightenment, can be seen as an analogy of societies becoming aware of the environmental determinants that shapes their very existence. As societies gain awareness of how their environment influences them, they may strive to adapt and respond to these influences. The philosopher Keynes he speaks about, when stretched, can represent the product of the environment. In fact, Plato's concept of philosopher Keynes enlightened rulers shaped by their education and environment. It aligns to some extent with environmental determinism. It to some extent suggests that individuals who emerge as leaders are products of their surroundings. And this to a larger extent echoes some determinative influence of the environment on human traits, human societal structures, and even leadership. I would like to add that whilst we can draw some parallels between environmental determinism and Plato's allegory of the cave, Plato's philosophy does not explicitly endorse environmental determinism. Plato's focus is more on the realm of ideas, with the cave serving as a metaphor for the journey from ignorance to enlightenment. Environmental determinism, on the other hand, focuses on the impact of the physical surroundings on human development. So what I've tried to do is to creatively use Plato's allegory of the cave to serve as a metaphorical tool in explaining some aspects of environmental determinism. But I also emphasize the influence of the environment on human perceptions, on behaviors, and even societal structures. The next theory in my set of trilogy will be environmental possibilism. It is believed that the possibilist concept emerged from geographers who normally transitioned into the field with a background in history. And the central idea of the possibilism argument is an emphasis on the freedom of humanity to make choices. According to this particular school of thought, human activity on Earth results from the initiative and the mobility of individuals working within the framework of natural forces. While acknowledging environmental constraints, the possibilists normally highlight the scope of human action rather than focusing on its limitation. And in a way, they are similar to the determinists, just that the possibilist starts with the concept of a terrestrial whole and the interrelationship of all phenomena on the surface of this earth. However, the possibilist place greater emphasis on human activities than the determinists, whilst considering the works of man as a starting point. The possibilists see the human being as an active entity, as an active force, that is capable of reacting to and changing his environment. And human activity, according to the possibilist, has the power to modify the environment both organically and inorganically. And some major proponents include Alfred Hetter, Vidal de la Blanche, and even Isaiah Bowman. So what then is environmental possibilism? The possibilists normally assert that the physical environment presents a lot of possibilities for human responses that normally allows the individual to have considerable discretion in the choices that the human being makes. And this is in sharp contrast with the determinist thesis, where there is a rigid causality. Possibilism upholds human agency, emphasizing that individuals are not just slaves to their environment. And the possibilists challenge the determinist notion that human beings are mere puppets that are normally controlled by their environment. But they also acknowledge that the environment sets some form of limitation on cultural development. But they contend that culture is not entirely defined by the environment. Rather, it is shaped by human choices and responses to these constraints. To the possibilist, the physical environment provides avenues for cultural development, and human beings, in response to their needs, make choices from the possibilities that is offered by the environment. They also assert that high-tech societies are seen as less constrained by the physical environment, and this showcases the dynamic interaction between culture and technology. The possibilists also recognize that humans cannot entirely free themselves from the physical environment. However, they acknowledge the distinct form from endorsing the complete determinist thesis. So what then would be the main tenet of environmental possibilism? 1. Balanced influence of the physical environment. To the possibilist, the physical environment establishes potential limits and possibilities for human societies and cultures. However, the ultimate development and adaptation is not determined by the physical environment. Rather, it is determined by the human agency and other cultural factors. 2. Human adaptability and shaping capability. To the possibilist, human societies possesses the capability to adapt to and actively shape their environment. In this case, technologies and infrastructures are notable examples in shaping our environment. 3. Equal importance of culture and history. In fact, to the possibilist, culture and history play a very important role in shaping human societies and cultures, and as a result, they hold equal significance with their physical environment. 4. Human societal agency. Human societies, to the possibilist, retain the agency to make the decisions and adapt to their environment, underscoring a very dynamic role that these things play in the developmental process. 5. The dynamic nature of the environment. The possibilists argue that the environment is not a fixed entity. The environment is dynamic, and as a result, the environment undergoes changes that is influenced by both natural and human-induced factors. 6. Limitations without determination. The possibilists acknowledge that while the physical environment may impose certain limitations on possibilities that are available for human societies, the physical environment does not determine the overall outcome. 7. Acknowledgement of complexity and human agency. In fact, the possibilists recognize the intricacies of human-environment interaction, and this perspective normally emphasizes the significant role that the human being plays in shaping the environment, in shaping his culture, and in shaping his history. Avoidance of assumptions. The argument of the possibilist avoids them or prevents them from making assumptions about certain regions being inherently predisposed to conflict or poverty, unlike what the determinists were associated with based on the physical characteristics. The possibilists acknowledge the role that politics, policy making, and power may normally play in shaping human-environment interaction, particularly in relation to how resources are allocated, how resources are distributed, how resources are assessed, and how even these resources are controlled. And then finally, there's a rejection of the deterministic interpretation that has been offered by determinism in relation to the economy and social systems. To the possibilists, there are no assumptions that specific economic or social systems are the only ones capable of developing a particular area. So they reject the determinist thesis outrightly. And these are just a few tenets of environmental possibilism. I've intentionally left this particular slide blank because if you carefully look at possibilism as a direct opposite of determinism, then you notice that the pros of determinism, when carefully analyzed, can become the cons of possibilism, and the cons of determinism can also become the pros of possibilism. So I want to see how my students will be able to tease out the argument in favor of possibilism and the argument against possibilism from that of determinism. In this last set of trilogy, where I'll be delving into environmental probabilism, I'll leave a lot of things unsaid. However, I expect my students to be able to clearly distinguish between environmental determinism, environmental possibilism, and environmental probabilism. Environmental probabilism is a concept, and to some extent, some scholars argue that it emerged as a reaction to environmental determinism. What does it normally posit? It posits that while the physical environment can influence human societies and cultures, the physical environment does not determine them in a fixed or absolute manner. Instead, the physical environment emphasizes the likelihood or the probability of other contravening factors based on environmental conditions. So the probabilists, they normally reject the extreme deterministic view that the physical environment rigidly determines human behavior and societal development. The probabilism theory also suggests that the physical environment influences human societies in a probabilistic manner, which means that it increases the likelihood of certain outcome but does not dictate these outcomes. Unlike the determinist theories, the probabilism theory normally acknowledges that there are other multiple factors that may influence the human being, his livelihood, and so on and so forth when given certain environmental conditions. Probabilism also emphasizes human agency, and to them, the human being is a crucial factor in this whole discussion. So it recognizes that human decisions and actions play significant roles in shaping how societies respond to environmental conditions. Environmental probabilism also takes into account the influence of culture and historical factors along the physical conditions or geographic condition. And as a result, they view these factors as interacting factors that normally shape human societies. Probabilism also believes that the relationship between human beings and their environment is very dynamic. While the environment sets certain probabilities, human actions and societal decisions and choices to a larger extent shape the course of human development. And environmental probabilism also emphasizes on adaptability of the human being. The human being can adapt, the human being can modify, and as a result, they recognize that societies normally innovate, societies normally adapt to varying environmental conditions rather than being constrained by these environmental conditions. Environmental probabilism also acknowledges that the influence of the physical environment can vary across different geographical regions, and as a result, it allows a more nuanced understanding of how environmental factors operate in specific geographic contexts. Probabilism also rejects the extreme argument that is normally put forth by determinism and asserts that a direct or rigid causal link does not exist between the physical environment and human behavior, civilizations, and human development. So, in essence, you note that probabilism provides a more flexible and nuanced framework in understanding the complex relationship between human beings and their environment, while recognizing how probabilistic this relationship can be and taking into consideration other factors other than the physical environment or geographic conditions. And from this brief explanation, we can easily tease out arguments that can be put forth in support of environmental probabilism and arguments that can be put forth in support of the other theories of human geography relationships I just spoke about. So as we finally draw the curtains down on the first part of this particular lecture, what have I been trying to do? At the beginning of the lecture, I tried to place the whole discussion in context by looking at some interesting extracts from prominent scholars who have attempted an explanation of the reasons or causes of the remarkable achievement of classical Athens from a geographical perspective. We also looked at some theories of human geography relationships, but we placed particular attention on environmental determinism, environmental possibilism, and environmental probabilism. What I'll be doing subsequently is to use these theories as a theoretical framework in explaining the reasons or the causes of the remarkable achievement from a geographical perspective. And I would also tease out some lessons that developing nations like Ghana can learn from the geography of the ancient Greek civilization. It has been an exciting journey so far. Thank you very much for your attention. I can't wait to see you again in part 2. Stay tuned and watch out.